Hello and welcome. I'm Randy Buehler, joined by Jason Ellis. I'm going to talk to you guys about the Mono-Black Aggro deck that he's been playing here. First Pro Tour, right?
Yep, first Pro Tour.
Been near the top of the standings the whole time. This Mono-Black Aggro deck is also pretty similar to the deck you qualified for the Pro Tour with, right?
I qualified for the Pro Tour with Mono-Black Aggro and Standard as well.
Makes sense. Run it back.
Yep.
All right, let's take a look at the block version of this deck that you've been running this weekend. Now, the deck is really about coming out as aggressively as you can, right?
Yep. The games you win most easily are the games where you're curving out 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop, and hopefully they can't keep up.
I guess Gnarled Scarhide, pretty good addition to a deck like this then?
Yep, definitely.
So no question about these. How many of these guys would you play if you weren't limited to 4?
At least 12.
At least 12 guys
Potentially
here?
more. That's what you can get in Standard now.
Makes sense. Now we look at the 2-drop slot. In block, it's Spiteful Returned, Pain Seer.
Yep.
Now, Pain Seer, do you care about the life? Does that ever come up? Does that matter in a deck like this?
It's a nice upside to have. I would actually play a different card if there was a better one.
Okay.
But there's definitely upside there, and it's nice.
Fair enough. Spiteful Returned is the better of these two?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that ability to just hit. And then how often are you playing it out versus bestowing it?
If you don't have anything else to do, you play it out, but if you do something else, you wait and try to bestow it. Makes
sense. Now, the 3-drop slot, I think, is where the real sexiness in this list lies. I don't know how many people were expecting 4 Master of the Feast to show up this weekend. Tell me about this bad boy.
It's huge, obviously, and it deals a whole chunk of damage if they can't kill it. It's very good against any non-black deck in the format, I think.
Okay.
So you bring it out against black decks, but it's very strong when they don't have much removal for it.
Okay,
especially instant speed removal.
Were you expecting a lot of black decks this weekend?
Not as much. I sort of thought the mid-range decks were going to be Naya.
Okay.
But it might not have been as good of a choice given how the field shaped up, but it's still a good card.
Okay. So Mogis' Marauder and Herald of Torment have been around a little longer.
Yep.
Those guys are just superstars, yeah?
Yeah, Mogis Marauder is one of your best tools against mid-range decks. You just play it and hopefully have a large board and you kill them.
And that wants to be, I guess, the last guy you're going to play down, right?
Yep,
the Intimidate
definitely.
is really the finisher in this deck?
Yep, it is. Deal the last 6 to 10 points of damage.
Yeah, or the flying. I've certainly seen Herald come off the top rope a couple of times this weekend.
Yep, definitely. It's a very powerful card.
Okay, so moving on. That's the creature set. Now, the removal, the disruption. I mean, Thoughtseize is just as good here as it has been in Standard all year?
Yeah, it's almost as good.
Almost as good?
Yep.
Only almost?
Only almost. There aren't cards like Supreme Verdict you can take. Everyone's playing a bunch of creatures and a bunch of redundant removal spells. They aren't relying so heavily on Supreme Verdict.
And then the creature removal set, Bile Blight, Hero's Downfall.
Yep.
No thought to silence the believers in this deck? Is it just too slow?
Yeah, it's a little bit too slow. The curve stops at 3 and there's only 22 lands. So it's a little bit too slow. You'd rather keep the curve down.
Okay. Speaking of those 22 lands, the mana base in this deck on the next graphic, pretty simple. Not a whole lot to play with in block here. Yeah, just 22 swamps, shuffle it up.
Yep.
Not the kind of deck that once it comes into play, tap off color.
No, definitely not.
Yeah, definitely not.
You want to curve out.
So tell me about the sideboard. You said you were expecting a lot of mid-range Naya decks.
Yep.
Probably expecting a fair amount of black aggro as well.
Also other aggro decks like blue-white heroic, stuff like that.
Okay.
Red.
So the 4th Marauder comes in.
Against the mid-range creature decks.
Okay.
You know, any Courser, Kruvik, Sylvan carried deck it comes in against.
There's a few of those this
weekend,
there's
a few.
And then, how good Agent of Fates is a card. I see sometimes it's in the main, sometimes it's in the sideboard, sometimes people are high on targeting effects. Seems potentially very powerful.
Yeah, it's definitely a powerful card. You want it against the heroic decks, and you also bring it in when you take out Master, so you preserve the curve of the deck.
Okay, so you want it against the heroic decks, but not everybody else.
Yeah,
not really.
It's like fine. It's not an insane card or anything.
I guess getting a carry added after they've already accelerated is not that exciting.
Yeah.
Fair enough. And then the rest of the board? When do these come in?
Bile Blight's just an extra removal spell. Whip comes in against red decks in the mirror match because it's all about racing.
Okay.
Silence the Believer is just another diversified removal spell, and Dark Betrayal obviously comes in against black creature decks.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yep.
Now, have you been happy with this sideboard, or would you do it differently if you had the tournament to run again?
I would probably add more Brain Maggots, so you have more cards to bring in against the black mid-range decks since you take out Master.
Okay.
But other than that, I like it.
Okay. So wishfully you had a little more against black mid-range.
Yes.
Which is when the Master comes out. That makes sense. Now, this is the block constructed version of this deck. You've had success also in Standard with it. What does the standard version of this deck look like?
You cut down on 3-drops, bring down the curve, you add Cackler and Thrill Kill Assassin, take out Pain Seer, you bring down the curve and get more aggressive.
All right, so...
more resilient creatures as well.
So you'd rather have, you want the 12 ones, less 3s, that's really the shift?
Yeah,
and then Pain Seer doesn't make the cut at the 2-drop slot?
Yep, that's exactly it.
Makes sense. Good deck, recommend people try it out?
Yeah, it's a fun deck to play, it's good, so I recommend it.
Awesome. There you go, Mono-Black Aggro. Works here in Block Constructed for Jason. It can work in Standard for you guys too. This is Randy Buehler, sending it back.